Over a year ago, I did a video about all the struggles I had growing in my Greenstalk vertical planters. Then, after that video aired, it got a ton of feedback. And it also gave me an opportunity to talk with some of the executives over at Greenstalk about some of the issues that I was facing. I put a lot of those suggestions to play, and then I tested them because I wanted to see if they would actually work not only in the winter and fall and spring here in beautiful Florida, but also in the dead heat of our summers, which can be tough on pretty much all plants. The biggest issue I had with the vertical planter was the watering system. Now I know that the watering system that they have made is exceptional. It is beyond anything that's out in the market, so props to them. But I've had struggles with it, and my struggles came in two parts. So the first one was when I got this particular Greenstalk. This was 4 years ago. Man, time flies. Anyway, during that time period, the holes that they had put in the watering trays had this little line through the center of it in order to, I think, help disperse the water more. But really, in my climate, all it did was plug up those holes super easily. I put the tops on, it still plugged up the holes. It just wasn't flowing properly, and it just limited the amount of water. So I personally drilled holes through those, small, not huge. I didn't make huge holes, but I made small holes with a drill bit to help the water flow better. That helps during fall, winter, and spring in Florida, but that didn't help during summer. So during summer, not only would I drill the holes, but I would also take the watering pitcher here on the top, take it off, and completely flood the upper compartment or the upper planter part so that it would leak water down into the rest of it at a very, very heavy volume. That worked for me. But when I talked to them, they did tell me that over, several years, they had went back to their original design for the holes in the watering reservoir. So they sent me some new watering trays, and I actually have put those up, and I've been using them for about a year now. I did not touch those. I did not drill those. I've been using them as they are intended, and they worked spectacular through fall, winter, and spring. It was unbelievable, so easy. I watered like once a week. It was outstanding. But here's a real test. We're in the dead of summer. How did they do? Well, they did better than my old ones, but it's still not quite there. It's still not quite right. And so since I did that video, I have adjusted a little bit of how I water these. Instead of just taking the watering reservoir off and filling the entire top of the planter with a significant amount of water, I changed it up, and now I'm actually filling each level with water. So I fill the top reservoir as it's intended, and then I come into each one of these pockets and I take the end piece off my watering can, and I pour a significant amount of water into each one of the levels. That seemed to do a lot better than just chucking 5 gallons of water in the top reservoir. What would happen is the top one would become waterlogged and the bottom ones would be watered more appropriately. So now, instead of chucking all of it into the top one, I'm kind of putting a gallon into each one of them, and that works perfectly. I only have to water my Greenstalks once every 3 days during our dead heat of summer, and for those of you who live down here in the South, you know that that is amazing. Once we move back into cooler weather, I am going to revert back to just filling up the water reservoir. Now, the second issue I had was with the bases. So my bases, when I originally got my Greenstalks 3 years ago, there was only the mover base that was available, which is kind of like an octagon shaped base with the wheels on the bottom, and it would move based on those wheels, and you could rotate it by moving the wheels or moving it back and forth. It does work, but it's not super easy, and I don't want to be out here struggling with, moving or spinning my bases every single day if they don't move really, really well. So Greenstalk suggested that I instead move from the mover bases to the spinner bases, which is what I have on here. I used to have the wheels on the spinner base, but honestly, I think that it just makes it unlevel, which we're going to talk about in a little bit because that was another one of my complaints. But the spinner base without wheels is super, super sturdy. And look how easy it is to spin. I have no problems whatsoever coming out here and spinning this base because I can literally do it with one finger. This is by far the best base. I am moving all of my green stalks from the mover base to the spinner base because this is the way to go. Guys, you heard it from me. There's no need to buy the mover bases. At least I don't think so. I mean, there might be a purpose if you're moving them around for shade, maybe, because these don't necessarily move around that well, but they do spin well, and that's the big difference. When I talked to Greenstalk, the next big thing we talked about was soil. They had made a suggestion about using Happy Frog. At the time when I was growing in my Greenstalk, I was using a Miracle Grow Organic. I think it was a potting soil. No, I think it was a garden soil, which is equally bad. You should be using some kind of potting soil. But I wanted to test it out. I wanted to see if the very expensive Happy Frog could compare to the Miracle Grow, and I wanted a simple, inexpensive type of soil to be our common denominator, or the one that sits in the center. And another one of their suggestions was ProMix. This was actually, I found on their website and on some of the Facebook groups, people were recommending this. So I was like, okay, Miracle Grow, ProMix, and Happy Frog, and I did an experiment to see which one was the best. And spoiler here, if you do want to go watch that video, I'm going to put it at the end of this one so you can see exactly the differences between them. But the spoiler was, this guy was the winner, and I didn't even really, this was a second thought. I thought, oh, we should have 3 instead of 2 going against each other. So really, this was a second thought, and it has now become my absolute favorite soil to use. Not just for the green stalks, but for every single one of my pots. I use it as a seed starting mix because look how light and fluffy. Guys, this stuff like blows away in the wind. It is so light and fluffy. All my plants respond so well to it. You can get it at Walmart. I'm sorry I'm sounding salesy right now, but I absolutely love this soil. And I kind of stumbled on it as a part of doing this little experiment. I have put this now in all my green stalks. It works tremendously. They come in a couple different colors. I think the pink one is the potting mix, and it is designed for potting. They don't sell that in my area, and getting it shipped here is like very expensive, so I'm not doing that. I'm actually using the garden mix, which goes against all principles that I have because potting mix is for pots, garden mix is for the garden. But this, it works. I don't know what else to say. It works. I do add a little bit of fertilizer to it. I put some tomato tone or garden tone into the vertical planter tiers, and it has worked phenomenal for me. It's been a year and I'm still not sold on the stability of these planters. If you've noticed here, I have an original and I have a leaf. Please excuse the dead plants. We are moving in between seasons right now. I'm saving seed, so this one doesn't look that great, but just look past that. This one is the original, meaning that the size of the pockets are super deep. They're about 12 inches. And this is the leaf, which is only about 5 or 6 inches. When it comes to the leaf, I feel very confident putting 5 tiers in. When it comes to the original, nope, I put 4 tiers in. If I were to put the 5th tier in, I'd have 2 problems. Number one, getting my buckets of water or my hose up there high enough to where I can actually see the water is basically impossible. I'd have to be lifting these things over my head. It's too tall. The second reason is it's pretty wobbly. They are clipped in and it's sitting on a concrete slab, a leveled concrete slab, and it's still a bit on the wobbly side. Now, most of the time, it's not going to be a problem. But where I live, we get hurricanes, and a hurricane's going to knock that over in half a minute. So usually during hurricane time, I have to move these guys into the shed. And I understand, I'm not talking about Category 5 hurricanes. I'm talking about a tropical storm to a Category 1. I should be able to leave this out here, but I don't have trust for it. Now, part of what I think is the problem is I still have these mover bases on my old green stalks. So I think that the spinner bases without the wheels is a lot more stable. I still don't trust it with a full 5 tiers. I've had them fall and tip on me, and boy, is that a mess to clean up, and it's super heavy to clean up for somebody that is kind of weakling like me. So I still go with 4 tiers, but I am going to be switching over to those spinner bases because I do feel like they actually have a little bit better stability than these guys do. Now, Greenstalk executives had talked to me about whether or not they were actually clicking into place. There is a mechanism under each one of these tiers that clicks into the tiers above it and below it. And I did ensure that every single one of these are clicked properly and seated properly. I still end up with this instability. So for those who are watching this for the first time, you can go with a 3 or a 4. The cool thing is if you end up buying, say, 3 original planters, wait for them to be on sale. They get good sales throughout the year. But if you buy 3 original planters and a couple extra bases, you can end up with 5 of these since you're not using each one of the tiers. You just have to add a couple of the accessories like the water basin. Now, the last big gripe I had was I couldn't get seeds to germinate. And I think this was a common, is that the snake? Oh, Gregory. Gregory the garden snake, who is now, I finally found out where he lived. Let's take a look at him. You guys see him? There's Gregory. He lives underneath my little seating area. I guess he wanted to come and watch the video. That's funny. Gregory the garden snake is watching me film. I guess I am his entertainment for today. So where was I? Oh, I was able to solve some of the issues I was having with being able to germinate seeds. So the biggest problem I had when I germinated seeds is that they would sprout. Well, not all the time. So about half the time they wouldn't sprout, and the other half the time that they did sprout, they would die shortly afterwards. It was a combination of issues. The first one was the soil. The soil that I was using, which was at the time the Miracle-Gro Organic, had too much thick pieces of wood and stuff like that, and it would keep them from being able to germinate. Once I moved to ProMix, that solved the problem. It's so loose and fluffy that they just kind of pop right through it. So that was one thing. Now, I still had the issue where they would pop up, they would grow, and then they would just die. And I realized the problem was how much I was filling the Greenstalk with soil. So if you filled it completely to the top, it's like the center water basins wouldn't fit properly. So what I ended up doing is I filled it to the point that the water basins could still sit in there in between the tiers. And then I took scoops of dirt and I hand put them into each one of the pockets so that the dirt was completely level with the top of the Greenstalk tier. After that, I would add grass clippings or some very, very fine shredded wood mulch or pine shavings, straw, whatever you have, right? And that worked outstanding. They germinated quickly. When the seedlings popped up, they had enough light because they were able to come up over the edge and be able to get the sunlight. And then the third thing that I did was whenever I plant seedlings, I try to make sure that that portion of the Greenstalk is kind of empty. And if it's not empty, like with this basil right here, I will chop the basil down very heavy. I mean, this plant would come down to like right here. So that way it has an unobstructed view. It doesn't have any shade and it's going to get all the sunlight it needs. I also try not to rotate it too much during the time that it first pops up in its first week. I rotate it as minimally as possible so that it's not sitting in a shady area, and that has solved every single one of my germination issues. Oh, one more thing. When it comes to watering, when you're seeding each one of the pockets, is you actually need to water the pockets in that case. I walk around with a spray bottle and I spritz the top of those pockets so that way they, get the water that they need, because by putting the water in the top reservoir, it is not going to keep the top portion of that soil moist. It just won't. So spritz it with water or with a very light flow hose. If any of these tips have helped you with your Greenstalk vertical planter, make sure to head down and give me a comment, or better yet, just give me that big thumbs up. Thanks so much for hanging out with me today, talking all about the vertical planter, guys. I have a link down below if you're interested. Happy gardening.